So hi everyone, I'm Sarah Sheeran from TSF Finance, a commercial finance broker with the company. I'm joined here today with Josh Levy from Ultimate Finance. How are you today, Josh?
Wonderful, thanks Sarah. Great to be here.
Great.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, thanks for coming on.
Pleasure.
Do you want to start off by telling us a little bit more about yourself and the business that you run?
Absolutely. So as you said, Josh Levy, CEO of Ultimate Finance. So we're a specialist asset-based lender. We cover the whole UK. So we have offices from Edinburgh down to Bristol and everything in between. We have Leeds, Manchester, Lutterworth and London. What we do very simply is we provide funding for small businesses around the country. So asset-based lending solutions, the sort of things that we do together, working capital, asset finance, bridging. And really, if an SME needs capital, then we try and help.
Brilliant. And can you give me a little bit more of an insight into the relationship that you have with brokers in general and TSA Finance more specifically?
Absolutely. So Ultimate Finance, we are basically a lending business that works with intermediaries like TSF, like yourself. So we have relationships with brokers, accountants, advisors around the country. Our origination source essentially is through that channel. We do not have a direct relationship as such with our borrowers at the beginning. People come to us via their trusted advisor looking for finance, and that's where we get involved. And so we cover the relationships around the country. The broker-advisor relationship is really integral to our business. And so we treat the broker part as our key partners within the transaction.
Absolutely. And why do you think Ultimate Finance chose to have a purely broker channel in terms of not necessarily having direct salespeople on the ground doing that work for you? What was the reason for broker-led?
If we go back to the beginning, so Ultimate Finance started in 2002. So we've been going for over 20 years. Originally, we were a Bristol-based lender providing one product, invoice finance, factoring solutions to small businesses regionally. Around the time of the financial crisis, the industry changed massively. So the banks retrenched from small business lending, multiple products exits, and different lenders came into the market like ourselves to essentially fill the void that was vacated by the main clearing banks. And we're going back 15 years now. And so the industry, the alternative lending, the specialist finance market, whichever way we want to refer to it, has grown out of that gap essentially. And the routes to market for a high street bank who has branches on your local high street, you're very well known, you're a Lloyds, you're an RBS, you're HSBC, you have those relationships that go back decades. Whereas for people like us, our route to market is not through trying to be known to every business owner around the country, because we have to be realistic about what we can do. And so we work in partnership with the introducer market intermediaries to essentially find the right solutions for SMEs. And that's really how the industry has evolved over that 15-year period. And it works really well.
Fantastic. Well, that's great to hear. And can you tell me a little bit more about the journey as to where you are now from where you've come when Ultimate Finance was originally made and when it was first created? Like, what was the idea behind it? Like, why did you decide to go into it?
Yeah, so 20 odd years ago is where it started. So I can cover a period of it. But the early years of Ultimate Finance were very local, regional based in Bristol, largely providing that single product view. It was a relatively small business. In 2010, Ultimate started providing asset finance solutions. So the first additional product based out of Lutterworth in Leicestershire. And it was trying to be a bit more relevant to SMEs, and that's really where the additional products came in. And the story accelerated around 2015. So 2015, Ultimate was acquired by a family office called Tavistock. Tavistock is an international investment group with about 200 companies around the world, centered around the UK, US, Australia, and various other geographies. And Tavistock acquired Ultimate with the intention of creating a national SME lending business, trying to do things better within the market. We understood how to borrow money because we have all these companies around the world. And we just saw the opportunity to improve upon what was being done, and also to take advantage of that gap that I mentioned earlier, to fill the void vacated by the high street banks and to really step into their shoes. And that 2015 inflection point to today took the business from a loan book of about £50 million to where we sit today, about 350 million. And so the acceleration has been, and it's not just scale for the sake of scale, it's about how you build like a diversified lending business. So we do 3 products or 3 solution types. We offer working capital finance, which is invoice finance, so receivables type structures, asset finance, which is as simple as you're buying a piece of machinery or a vehicle, and bridging, which is secured against residential property.
Yeah.
And that acceleration of the loan book was partly from the diversification of what we do. It was also through growing our national coverage. It was growing our introducer base. And so we work with intermediaries around the country. We have people around the country. We have a team of about 150 people today. And that office network just means we can provide local services to local relationships. And that's really been the development of us over the years. We've made so many mistakes over that period of time. Like that, the rose tinted view is we've grown from X to Y and it's been all great, but we've learned a lot along the way. Okay. And some early mistakes, but you have to recognize them and learn from them, evolve from them. And so we're very clear on what we do and what we don't do. And I think that's been the most important thing for us. And so when you ask about why do you choose to work with the intermediary channel and not have a direct brand out there? Yeah. One of the lessons from the early years, what we were trying to do is you have to be really focused on who your audience is and who your customer is. And that has served us very well and will continue to serve us well, we think.
Okay, fantastic. I'm going to circle back to the mistakes part in a second, but I'd really love to know why in 2015, when the family office bought Ultimate Finance, you decided to take the reins of the business and join as CEO. What was your motivation behind that?
So I joined, I actually worked for the family office in a different role between 2015 and 2018. Mm-hmm. I took over the CEO role at the start of 2019. So I had been involved in those years as well. So I was involved in the mistakes and the good things, but I took over at the start of 19 really with the intention of how do we take what we'd built and grow it into something bigger, better, a bit more specialist, and I guess kind of learn from some of the things we tried in the past. My background for my sins has always been in financial services. So my first career path was in investment banking. So I worked for Investec Bank out of university, and it was great. I was involved in corporate finance, corporate advisory, M&A type transactions, got great exposure to decision makers, was involved in lots of different things. It was brilliant variety and it was wonderful, great experience. And then when I joined the family office, joined Tavistock in 2015, 2016, it was playing a role that kind of served some of those skills. So around strategy and finance. And was fortunate enough to travel the world and be involved in lots of companies we own around the world. And so to be involved in different events, whether that's financing, buying, selling, strategic change, like it was a very enjoyable period.
Can imagine.
We'd owned by that stage, we'd owned Ultimate for 3 years. And it was a good opportunity to step into something and make it my own. And we're now into, what's this, year 5 or 6. And there's been lots of challenges along the way, but it's been a great ride, and we've got an amazing team, and it's just been a journey that we want to continue.
Absolutely. Talk to me about building that team. How do you go about selecting who your right-hand man or woman is in terms of the people that support you in the role that you do for Ultimate?
I think it probably circles back to my path. So I came into the chief executive role in 2019 as a 28, 29-year-old. And so I came into an industry where, and any industry, any role like that, where you've got people that have got decades of experience that I didn't have. And so, in terms of doing things your own way and having, the ability to learn from people around you, I believe you have to fill your team, your top team and the business with, I guess, the knowledge and skills that create the sum of the parts that's greater than just the individual components. And that's what we've done at Ultimate. And I was lucky I inherited a great team to start with, and we've changed and added along the way. And if I look around, like my executive team and the managers in the business and the leaders, we have lots of diversity in terms of the way they think, the experience, the background, and that, I guess, makes us a better, stronger unit in terms of how we make decisions and how we look at different problems as they arise.
Absolutely. And what about the culture of the business? How important is that for you and to Ultimate Finance and the success?
Yeah, it's huge. Culture eats strategy alive is the phrase, and I think it's very true. Like the early years of the Tavistock investment into Ultimate, so that 2015, 2018 period, a lot of it was about transforming the culture and making it fit for purpose for the future, and growing up, quite frankly. Like when we bought into the business, it was small. It had a lot fewer people than it does today, and so you have to make sure you've got a values-based system that can, I guess, enable you to grow and do what you want to do. And so culture is key. It's funny when I look back on some of the things we did when I first took the role, like it was about how we enable flexible working. This was the year before COVID. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about what flexibility we offer to our staff. And within the space of 6 months, everything got blown out of the water with everyone working from home. But like, it was important you do the things where you enable people to thrive in the environment you want them to.
Yeah. And
so like it does distill down into the way you treat people, the way you treat people internally is the way you treat people externally, but all the way you work together. So we talk about a one team culture and a one team approach, what we try and do. And we have 3 core values of decency, brilliance, and enterprise. And that really governs the way we try and operate and the way we try and think. And the history of Ultimate and the way the genesis of it was essentially product silos. So you started with an invoice finance business, an asset finance business that was kind of vertically integrated and largely standalone with a team that was kind of centralized a little bit, but it was, run as autonomous units to some degree. And what we've tried to do, and we've successfully been able to do this over the last 5-6 years, is bring it all together. And so when we're facing into our market, the intermediaries, the customers, the business owners who don't really want to think about product, they just want cash funding for whatever purpose they need it for. But we have to make sure our culture and our structures enable that rather than get in the way. And we have learned from, I think, some of the challenges that come with much larger organizations where these structures are very self-reinforcing, and you're talking to 3 different people within the same organization getting different answers, and they don't know each other, and we're of a size at 150 people that we have no excuses for that. And so the one team element is big for us, and it's been a successful part of why we've been able to become a diversified multi-product lender rather than just doing things in individualized silos.
Yeah, absolutely. So your whole team are multi-trained and your credit facilities are underwritten together rather than as separate?
To a degree. We have to have specialism.
Yeah.
And so like the operating teams for each product definitely have specialist components to them. So like the running of an invoice finance facility versus how you manage an in-life facility for asset finance or a bridging facility is very different.
Yeah,
and so you need to make sure you've got the skills that can do that. But in terms of the way we think at the sharp end, the new business side, where we look on the credit space, the way we manage facilities, the way there's more than one within the same lender, that's where the multi-product expertise comes in.
Yeah.
And we want to give the team and the environment where they can spread their wings and not be boxed in, and they can do what they want to do. And so when we look at the sales team, we have the people that are out there structuring and writing and originating facilities. They want to be able to talk about more than just one option.
Absolutely.
Because then it makes us more relevant. It means the conversation can be more purposeful. And when you have 2 options for a business owner, one, I believe, you have things under one roof versus you have to go to 2 or 3 different parties.
Yeah.
It gives us a compelling proposition, hopefully, to take to market, which has been good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's something that TSF strive in as well, in terms of having that multi-product offering, because you are really able to tailor solutions to businesses and meet all of their needs in one go, rather than it being more of a clunky process of try this and then, okay, that didn't, or that might have worked, but we need more now, so let's try that. So absolutely understand where you're coming from there. In terms of you mentioned obviously building the team and the leadership style and your approach to leadership as well. How would you say that's evolved over time?
Massively. So again, coming back to like day one of taking a chief executive role at 28, 29, you have to evolve, you have to learn as you go, and you have to be open to criticism in a constructive way and take the learnings. And I'm definitely not too proud to recognize where I get things wrong. Like in this sort of role, you're making decisions every day and you get things wrong every day.
Yeah.
But it's understanding what happened, why you got things wrong, and changing it for the future. So if you make the same mistake twice, that's a problem. If you make it once and you learn from it, I don't see that as a big challenge. And that's the sort of leadership style that we've tried to create. And it's not just about me. Like I may be the one with the job title. It really is a team environment. And so we try and make sure we've got people that can be, autonomous and enabled to do things their way, and work as a collective unit. And that's been one of our strong points. But we have to make sure we've got the structure for that, and the collaborative nature of it is one of the things that hopefully I've tried to bring to the table, and a bit of fresh thinking. Like as I said, I haven't been in this industry for 40 years.
No.
And some people that have been in these sort of businesses,
typically in CEO roles as well, have been in the business for years. Yeah.
And they know it, but it becomes this is the way we've always done it. And I think one of the strengths we've tried to bring to the market is, let's try and approach it differently, which, to be fair, is what TSF, since you've come into the market as an advisor, you've tried to do.
Yeah.
Like the broken setup has been very well established over a number of years. The lending space the same, and new entrants, whether it's new people or new firms, can take a fresh approach on what you try and do. And we've worked together now for you've obviously been there 3 years.
Yep.
and TSF have been around 5 years.
Correct.
Right.
Well
so
done.
I get the numbers correct. And since the start point, really, we've worked with the team to try and find the alignment between our offering and what you're offering to clients. And it's not everything, but there's a lot of crossover, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do you feel like you leverage the relationships of brokers within the market in terms of learning what the customer wants and what they need, and taking on that feedback from broker? How does that help establish your route to market and ultimately the product that you're offering at the end of it? And the service,
we do a lot of this, and like the market changes all the time, and your product offering and the way you do things has to adapt to it.
Yeah.
And so we definitely take regular feedback and soundings from our key partners, because we'd be arrogant if we were saying, this is the best way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to learn from what competitors are doing, what customers are needing. Like, there's a different generation of business owners growing up in this country and around the world, and what the way technology is used, the way people think about what their business and risk appetite changes. And so we have to make sure not just the product we offer and we can package, it's the way you deliver it.
Yeah.
It's the process you put around it. And it's also the relationship service that people want. Like, we do find at heart, we're not in the corporate space, we're in the SME world, and relationships really, really matter. And that tripartite relationship between the business owner, the borrower, the lender, us, and the advisor, you guys, is critical, because it has to be three-way rather than everyone kind of doing their own thing. And that's how you get the best solution for the client ultimately that will survive for the long term.
Absolutely, I agree with that. So just circling back to the mistakes that you mentioned. So in terms of, and like, it doesn't necessarily have to be within Ultimate Finance either, but in general, what would you say is the most unexpected challenge that you've faced in your career so far, and how did you overcome it?
I think on the mistakes part, the mistakes and the challenges have been slightly different. So the mistakes for us was moving into markets where we had no real right to be there. So we weren't really...
Such as?
So we moved into the unsecured loan market.
Okay.
And it just wasn't our bag. But I think people can do it very successfully. In a funding circle where you used to work, there's plenty of people that do it well. We weren't one of them. And it wasn't because the team weren't very good. It's because it wasn't what we do. We were very good at providing secured lending facilities with assets in the background, whether that's receivables, machinery, vehicles, property. That's what we understand. That's how we deliver solutions. And we tried to move into the unsecured loan market with a bit of a theory of, we can go and create this digital loan offering, and therefore you can provide funding within 10 seconds. That was the
automated.
It was how you have this automated journey. And it's not to say it can't be done, because people are doing it.
Well, it's being done right now, right?
It's just, it wasn't for us. And
appetite's very different for it, and the setup's very different.
When you come into a new lending offering where you provide a new type of funding, you either have to compete on price, risk, or service, or features, which is a
combination of all three.
Like, no one ever wants to say they compete on price or risk, but in reality, you end up having to do one of the two as a new start lender. And when we created that offering, that's really what we were doing, and it was largely around the risk component, and it was a distraction from the core business, which has thrived over the last number of years. And so we recognized it wasn't an area where we were excelling in or specializing in, and so we exited that market in my first year. So my first year was a lot about consolidating what we'd built and making sure that the future was fit for purpose. And so we came out of some markets that we weren't particularly doing well in, or didn't really have a clear vision for being in that space, and it's allowed us to focus purely on what we do well. So there's some of the mistakes. In terms of the challenges, the obvious cliche is COVID. The COVID period was remarkable for many reasons.
Mm-hmm.
It forced us to adapt as a business. It forced me to adapt as a leader.
Yep.
And in many ways, I think we're a hell of a lot stronger for it. But it didn't feel like that at the time, when the world was, not quite collapsing around you, but it felt like it.
It was the uncertainty, right? Nobody really knew what was happening.
Correct. And the interesting thing about where we sit as a lender, as part of a family office, so as I said, Tavistock owns about 200 companies around the world.
Mm-hmm.
So we understand what it means to run a business.
Yeah.
Which is great, because when we provide solutions and we talk to clients, generally we can relate to the challenges and things they face, because we're in the pub
been there,
industry,
done it before.
We're in the football market. Yep. We own property around the country. We run a lot of different types of businesses, and so we're attuned to what's going on, which is a real strength.
Absolutely.
But I guess when the COVID period, when really the pandemic started, and it was coming out of China into Italy, we were seeing supply chain pressures, and then we think about ourselves as a group. We have got a lot of hospitality exposure.
Mm-hmm.
So we were gradually seeing every single week, more people just not going to pubs, restaurants, hotels, football stadiums. It was becoming quite obvious what was happening. And so we probably saw it a little earlier than others through that channel. It didn't mean we were any more prepared for it, but like, we saw it coming. And so facing it as a lending business, whilst knowing that other parts of the group had turnover go from, let's take the pub business we're involved in. We own, we're the largest shareholder in a company called Mitchells and Butlers, which is 1,800 pubs and restaurants around the country, annual turnover in excess of 2 billion. Well, overnight, that went from a large number to zero. Yeah. And so when you see things like that happen and you understand what's really going on in the world, like, it does really put the frighteners up people. And so we were able to learn from some of those real world experiences and take it into how we were able to support our clients, because we recognise that it's not their fault. Like, some of these situations were not they're making. And so we had to up our game in terms of how we communicate internally. Everyone was concerned. Yeah. And so it definitely sharpened our messaging strategy. And a lot of that has continued today, even 4 years on. Absolutely. It's almost like how you deal in a crisis situation. Correct. And you don't know until you're in it. So absolutely. Yeah. And keeping calm, I think, is one of the most important things you can do, right? On the surface, even if you're not calm underneath, that you have to project that air of confidence to customers and also to staff. And to your people. People look to you for what's going to happen. And sometimes the important thing is you don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. But we'll work through it logically, and we'll go through it together, and we'll find the right solutions. And look, thankfully, the country emerged out of it in okay shape. Mm-hmm. Largely. And the lending markets, I think, stepped up. And I think that's really, if you look at the difference between the financial crisis era and what happened in 2020, 2021, but the market really adapted quickly. Absolutely. Kept lending, kept supporting clients, and I think the economy is a lot stronger for it. Yeah, absolutely. I do think, and sometimes when we're in a crisis situation, opportunities come from it, and it's who takes a hold of those opportunities and makes the most of them, right? Correct. So speaking of taking hold of opportunities, what would you say it's important to ask about your personal goals as well, but obviously a lot of your personal goals, I can imagine, are aligned to the business, given the family background. So what would you say your personal and business goals are for the future? Yeah, so we try and avoid setting arbitrary targets without any means of saying this is how we're going to get there. But we've come a long way. We've gone from a loan book of 50 million to 350 million. But critically, we're a profitable business. We're a strong business with great networks within internally and externally. That's what we try and do. Mm-hmm. But we want to keep going. Like, there's a massive market opportunity for us and other people in the market. The move from, I guess, the high street to the specialist lenders will continue. The move towards kind of more structured solutions will continue, and that's what we're trying to do. Mm-hmm. We could put big targets out there, but in reality, what we want to do is to make sure we're as relevant and as strong as we can be to take advantage of all the inevitable disruption that will happen, and we can step in and keep growing and keep going with that. And that's really my personal ambition as well as the business ambition. Like, we want to be known as the funding partner of choice, and that really means that when there's a lending proposition that fits the sort of facilities we can provide, mm-hmm. the introducer community and then ultimately the client chooses us. And that isn't easy. You have to work hard at that. You have to make sure that you continue to grow and evolve and improve, and that's what we do every day. And that's the ambition, really. It's just to make sure you never lose sight of that relentless drive for improvement, both self-improvement at my level and also as a business that we have to keep going forward. Yeah, absolutely. So just going into the granular of setting goals and how you go about achieving them. Like within TSF, we talk about going back to basics and keeping things really crystal clean and understanding what needs to come in the top to come out the bottom, and talk about conversions and loan values, etc., to get to where we want to be. And ultimately, it all comes down to volume and the amount of businesses that we're acquiring. And it doesn't really matter what the transaction size is, because come volume, comes the results. So what would you say is your process of setting a goal, and what is it's important to Ultimate and to yourself to get there? There's two elements for us, which is maybe slightly different. One, you've got the new business side of this. So how much volume can you generate every year and write new business? And the other is, we've got, let's say today we have 4,000 clients on our books. Yeah. And how do we make sure we're providing the best service to them so that they have a good experience with us? Like on an invoice finance facility, the average life for us is about 6 years, 7 years, which is very good in our market. Yeah. And we want to continue growing that. That means that the client relationship is strong. It means that they enjoy the service, that they get supported from at Ultimate. They like the relationship management team, and we're doing what they need essentially, mm-hmm. and we can grow with them. And so I look at it from two sides on the setting targets and objectives. One, we absolutely want to continue growing our new business volumes. Like we want to write more business and cover the range of what we can do and be more relevant to our markets. The second is not losing sight of you've got to focus on credit quality and the loan book performance, which is critical, but also beneath this there is a customer and there's a client.
Yeah.
And we have to always be mindful of what they need and what they want. And that does change. And so we set objectives around different parts of the business, and we take a very documented approach, and we make sure we're cascading messages down so everyone's very clear what we're trying to do. But we have to recognize that there's different elements to go into it. And so it's quite nuanced in our world.
Okay, so there's no set procedure.
Well, from a process point of view, there is. We have a strategy team. We go through an exercise every year. We're actually, was it mid-October, end of October right now? We're going through that, thinking about next year. And it always seems bizarre how early you have to start these things. But to go into a business planning cycle, we essentially start with feeding team ideas up from the teams, and make sure we take feedback from the market. And you asked a question earlier around, do you speak to your introducers and get feedback on positioning, competitiveness, like what the market conditions are? And we do that as part of the exercise, so we understand. And sometimes it can be brutally honest and point areas where you need to improve, and that's absolutely fine. We can do more with constructive criticism than we can with everyone patting us on the back. And so that we do make sure we solicit it from the right people, yourselves included. And it's making sure you work with people that can be transparent and direct, because that's how you improve. And so we take that feedback, both internal and external, and factor it into kind of business planning goals, what our objectives are. And once you set the objectives, we set some key results around it. So how do we measure success? And then how do we actually achieve this? What are the initiatives and what are the work streams that we have to put in place to make sure that we can achieve our ambitions? Because the worst thing you can do, and come back to the arbitrary word I used earlier, you can set a very striking and grand ambition. But if you don't know how you're going to get there, it's just words or numbers on a page, and it doesn't really mean anything. We try and make it very structured in terms of, this is what we want to do, and this is how we're going to get there, and this is how we're going to judge ourselves against it. Because we set these targets to be accountable, and both internally and to ourselves, and we communicate that quite clearly.
Absolutely. So speaking of being accountable, I think accountability is one of the biggest things that I certainly thrive myself on when it comes to servicing clients, but accountability can look very different for different roles. So in terms of keeping yourself accountable to everything that you're saying you want to do, in terms of the goals for the business and the service you want to provide and the ultimate objective of ultimate finance, I used the word ultimate twice there, sorry. How do you keep yourself accountable? What's your process personally?
So we have very clear business targets, as I said, and that's numerical and non-numerical. And so the financial side of that is very easy. It's performance against what you said you do. And because incentive schemes are aligned around this for all the teams, everyone bought into what we're trying to achieve and how we do it. And so that's the easiest thing. In terms of the non-financial parts of this, part of it is measuring feedback from clients, from introducers, from the team internally. So we have kind of internal engagement scores, we have external surveys that go out, and we use these to fuel the ambition to be better, also to really understand what's going on. And so it's other people playing back to us, whether we're good, bad or indifferent, and it's those sort of things that give us accountability. And ultimately we, as part of a much bigger group, we're accountable to reporting into, from a Tavistock perspective.
Absolutely.
And this is what we want to achieve for the business and how we're doing against that. And thankfully, the last, I think we're probably 4 years in a row now where we're looking set to beat our ambition for the year. And that sort of rhythm, momentum is invaluable because it feeds itself. You get into a new year and you've just had a great year and you strive for more. And so you always want to be bettering what you've achieved before.
Absolutely. So you talk a lot about the business and everybody in general and the culture, etc. But what about you personally? How do you keep yourself accountable to the business and its goals? I think it's really important as a you're obviously head of a large company, you've got a lot of responsibility, a lot of people that rely on you. So, and I think it's really important for smaller owner managed businesses to understand how to replicate that. So essentially, if that's where they want to get to, they want to become bigger. What kind of accountability measures do you have in place personally to hold yourself right to the business and the people?
I think it comes a lot through what the staff are playing back to us in terms of those engagement scores, because we have 15 or so questions that we ask people, and it really covers elements of what we call our people promise. So we make commitments to all of our teams every year about this is what it's going to mean to work at Ultimate Finance. And it really isn't just about the financial performance. It's the whole environment that you can provide. So it's everything from mental health and well-being, diversity, the charity commitments we make, and we do judge ourselves against that, and people give feedback and give scores against it, and that really is what I'm ultimately accountable for, is the delivery of our people promise.
Absolutely.
And it goes a lot further than just financial performance. I think that's really what you're asking, and we do that through being just very open. So we explain to people every year what we're trying to do. People are involved in that process, but I'm the one that stands up every couple of weeks to the company and talks about how we're doing, what we're doing, and it's admitting where you get things wrong. I think is a big part of the accountability. So saying, okay, we tried this, it didn't quite work, or we're not performing as well in this area as we'd like. A lot of it just comes back to honesty.
Absolutely. I think people really respect when you take ownership of situations like that and stand up and be like, right, we got this wrong and this is how we're going to fix it and we're going to work together to get there. I really respect that. And in terms of I'm trying to go into the personal side here because I think it's really important as a business owner, as I say, but what does your work-life balance look like? How do you manage that?
Honestly,
do you manage that?
It's a
is
struggle.
it possible?
I wear a few different hats. So obviously day job is Ultimate Finance. I'm also involved on the family office side. We have a few different businesses that I am loosely involved in from an oversight perspective. And so it does become quite difficult to juggle elements. Then you add time zones into this. So we have a large team based out of the US. We have businesses in Australia. We have businesses in different parts of the world. And so the day can stretch at times, but it's about finding perspective and balance. Like I have a family. I have a 1-year-old daughter. And so I try and make sure that I carve out the right times of the day where I can be a dad as well as running a business, and that is important to me, and I've only had to learn that over the last 12 months or so. But that's how I've tried to enable a little bit of more work-life balance, and you need a supportive group around you, friends and family, and I have that. I'm fortunate to have that, but I could be better at work-life balance for sure. But
is there anything you're working on now?
Prioritization is always what you try and do. So everyone's got their little their hacks, and mine is just write down your to-do list every day, every evening. And that's partly the accountability side. Like, this is what I said I would do.
Absolutely.
And the amount of times you get to the end of the day and you haven't touched your to-do list is a problem.
I know exactly how you feel.
But you have to start there. And so some of that thought process, just getting stuff out on paper so you know what you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely.
But there's always more you can do on the balance side.
On the balance side, I absolutely agree. I think that's such a common challenge. I think with any business owner, it's like you say, it's wearing all those different hats and it's trying to be everything to everybody, but then controlling the controllables at the same time and understanding you only have so many hours in the day. And ultimately, if you don't fill your cup, then you can't fill anybody else's. So
correct, and that's important. And just taking the time out, exercise, rest, leisure time is important.
Are you an ice bather? Like the ice bath? I'm really not into that trend right now.
Is that a trend?
Apparently. Okay, it's not for me though, that's for sure.
Bypassed me.
I'd rather lie in the sun. But let's move on to the financial landscape then. So obviously there's been changes in the regulatory market at the moment, but what challenges do you see in the current financial landscape that potentially could affect the SME market in general and Ultimate Finance as a lender?
Yeah, well, I think we sit here today on the week of the first budget by a Labour government in 14 years, and there's going to be some change coming.
Absolutely.
Some of it painful by the looks of it for small business owners, around capital gains tax and a few other things. And, there's lots of rumours about what it will entail. I think we'll see later this week, but that will definitely cause some, rethinking from business owners about their priorities, particularly if the capital gains tax part is a big factor in it. So I would expect to see some transactions on the back of this over the next 6 months as people adapt, succession plan, think about their future and what's in it for them. So inevitably around, fiscal policy, there will be some movement in the market. Regulatory wise, the regulatory burden is only increasing on lenders and ultimately on the brokers as well. And we all have to learn what those changes are and how we adapt to them. It will definitely cause some recalibration of certain relationships and the way that everyone communicates different things to the customer. Ultimately, the regulatory environment and the legal system is all designed to protect the customer, and so we have to make sure that we're meeting those standards, which will only get bigger and bigger every year. And so that's definitely one element to it. But the market just changes. Like, as I said, that you've got different generations growing up owning and running businesses, and what they look for is going to be different. So the one area we're focusing most is on the technology side.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's something that you guys are quite passionate about as well, and
Absolutely.
the way we can avoid this historic back and forth of sharing manual documents between customer and lender, essentially, and the intermediary in between. And so the way we can essentially extract data that exists in systems to provide quicker decisions and better decisions is a big one. So we're trying to use some of the inevitable shake-up that will happen in markets over the years to come and position ourselves well that we can be able to provide the best support we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned about the exit strategies and the planning based on what we think is going to come out in the budget. How are Ultimate Finance geared up for that? Is that something that you guys are prepared to lend against? Are you changing your policies in regards to it? Is it something that you're actively thinking about?
Actively thinking about, yes. But in terms of changing anything, no. So the way we look at our credit environment is we have to remain consistent. So when things are great and when things are terrible, we try and just be in the middle. So like I've talked to my team about the pendulum swings from one extreme to the other, and people are either very fearful or very buoyant. Generally, there's no middle ground. Everything's either great or terrible, and that's partly a consequence, I think, of social media environment to a degree. But I think views are a bit more polarized perhaps than they were in the past, and our job is to remain in the middle. So when everything's wonderful, everything's not so wonderful, in reality things move very small increments around the mean.
Yeah.
And we just try and remain very consistent, and that means that our credit approach shouldn't change depending on what happens in the budget, and it won't change. Where we can make sure we understand what it means for clients and what it means for us ultimately, like there will be, I suspect at the margin, some cost increases coming through on the tax side and employment and other things coming through for every business, and we just got to make sure that we understand what impact that has on clients and prospects. But I don't think it's going to be anything transformational in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that note then, what advice would you give business owners who maybe are feeling the pressure of rising costs or unpredictable markets or environment?
Seek help. The biggest, and you probably see this every single day, the biggest challenge a small business owner has is when they just don't address them early enough.
Absolutely.
And so whether that's a good opportunity seeking or whether it's dealing with problems or cost increases, interest rate rises and movements, it's just taking advice from the experts and just not being too proud to seek support. And that's from mentoring groups, it's from having external advisors, it's working with brokers, accountants, legal professionals, just to understand these things before they happen. So the earlier you address something, the more options you have.
Absolutely.
And you see it all the time when people come very late in the day, I need to do this, and suddenly the windows have narrowed, or the options have narrowed, and there's very few available to them. And so that would be my main advice to any business owner.
Absolutely. Ultimately, it ends up costing them more when they do that as well, because if you need something done fast, it's most of the time it's going to cost you because your options are very slim. No, absolutely, I agree with you there. So how do you see the role of alternative finance evolving over the next few years for SME businesses?
I think the trend will continue. Over the last couple of years, it's been the first time under the British Business Bank statistics that kind of non-high street banks have taken a bigger percentage of lending volumes than the big 5 or 6 banks that are out there. And that's a bit of a watershed moment for the market.
Yeah, huge milestone.
But I don't see it as a massive issue. So the way the market has evolved is you've now got really strong relationships between, I guess, the traditional clearing banks and people like us. We work with a few of the high street banks in the UK who provide wholesale facilities to us. They recognise that their market is not necessarily working with individual SMEs, but indirectly
they still have an appetite. Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think we're just going to keep seeing that trend perhaps accelerate as the regulatory burden keeps growing. I just think it's going to be harder for banks in particular to want to be in that market, and people like us in the alternative space. And I don't even know if I like the word alternative. Really, it's the specialist space.
Yeah. Well, if anything, it's going to become the more common space, because it's easier now to access finance through the alternative market than it is through your traditional banks. And ultimately, that means that our space, or the alternative space, is no longer alternative. That is really the number one option based on the statistics.
I agree. So I think that will just continue. And there's plenty of people in this market that do a great job and take a customer-centric view. Excuse me. And that's really what we have to thrive for. And that's what, those numbers will keep moving in that direction.
Absolutely. So are there any particular industries that you see growing rapidly, and how is Ultimate Finance positioned to be able to support them?
Growing rapidly. I think the construction market, I wouldn't say it's a growth market, but it's the one where there's the most help needed, both from a funding point of view and advisory.
Correct.
Like you see the trickle down effect of a big contractor coming out the market, of failing, going into the insolvency process, and what that means for subcontractors, and how that flows through the entire supply chain. So we offer a specialist construction product in some of our markets. We obviously work with a number of different construction businesses, and that's one area I think we can help and play a big part from a funding perspective. In terms of growth areas, like I think clearly technology, anything that's got tech enabled parts of their operating model will keep growing, and that isn't necessarily sector specific, but there's definitely opportunities for people to just make themselves more efficient and more effective, and the impact of things like AI will be pronounced. Hard to know exactly what direction that will go, but I think it's going to be significant over a number of years.
Yeah, absolutely. How are Ultimate Finance going to be adopting AI? Have you got any plans?
So we're currently trialing quite a number of things. We're taking a test and learn approach to this, rather than trying to pretend we know all the answers today. The technology is moving quickly, and we have to just try things. And so we're using a lot of the tools around Microsoft tools around Copilot, which is one thing we're doing to improve the efficiency of what we can do. So content creation, summaries of meeting notes, summaries of documents, trialing a lot of things in the legal setup. And so to understand whether you can run a contract, debtor contract, or whichever legal document it may be, through an AI tool to point out, okay, these are the things you might want to look at.
Yeah, any flaws.
So it's really using the technology to enable people to be better and basically value add on the tasks. And so that's definitely something we're trialing. Obviously, ChatGPT and everything around the generative AI part will be big for, I suspect, some of the industries, marketing industries,
absolutely,
content creation. You look at, you can now have imagery and videos and sounds created from AI, and that's going to have an impact somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Full disclosure, this is absolutely authentic.
You would say that if you were AI, though.
Yeah, well, that's true. Well, would you? Do they have a sarcastic side to them? I don't know. Right, quick fire questions, and that'll round us up. So, what is the best business advice you've ever received?
Be true to yourself. So I try and surround myself with people that I would probably refer to as mentors. I may not tell them that they're a mentor, but you utilize people's different experiences. And I always remember someone very early on in my career said, as I was taking a new role, just be yourself. Don't try and be someone else. You can maybe learn from other people, but you have to be authentic. Otherwise, you're going to fall flat on your face. And that's always stuck with me. And I'd give that advice to a lot of people.
Fantastic. And then if you weren't in finance, what do you think you'd be doing?
So funny enough, like my original career aspiration when I was going through school and university was to be a journalist.
Oh, wow.
Completely different to what I do today.
Yeah.
I enjoy writing. It was not ended up being for me, but like sports journalism probably would have been an alternative career in a different reality, because it's combined some passions that I have, but I'm pretty happy with how it all worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't blame you. Okay, great. Well, I think that rounds us all up, but thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Come all the way down up to Glasgow from London just for us. So yeah, it's been a privilege. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, and enjoyed it. Thanks, Sarah.